Hello everyone, welcome to the February 1st, 2024 Northampton City Council meeting. I'm Alex Jarrett. As City Council President, I'll be presiding this evening along with Vice President Rachel Maori. We are following public health guidance from our Health and Human Services Department regarding masking after a possible COVID exposure, as well as distancing. There are masks available on the way in if you wish. They are optional. And distancing is also encouraged. Feel free to rearrange the chairs as you like. This meeting and all participating in person and on Zoom will be audio and video recorded. I now call the City Council to order. Laura, will you call the roll, please? You're muted.
Councilor Dobbs.
Here.
Councilor Elkins.
Here.
Councilor Jarrett.
Here.
Councilor Labarge.
Here.
Councilor Maori.
Here.
Councilor Moulton.
Here.
Councilor Pastrich Clemmer.
Here.
Councilor Perry.
Here.
And Councilor Rothenberg.
Here.
Council President, you have a quorum.
Excellent. So tonight's highlights include a presentation from our Finance Director on the second quarter budget report. We'll be considering 3 ordinances about stop signs and parking, and we'll consider a final vote on a proposed lighting ordinance. So if you wish to make a public comment, you can sign up on the sheet at the podium. Many of you have. If you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature, and that is in the bottom menu bar by reactions. I don't see anyone on the phone. No. Okay. If you're having trouble raising your virtual hand, you can turn on your video and physically raise your hand. You can also use the chat feature if we have it. I'm not sure if we have it. Doesn't look like we have it. Okay. So you turn on your video and physically raise your hand if you are having trouble with the virtual hand. You can also submit a written public comment. You can email it to citycouncil@northamptonma.gov. It will be sent to all councilors, and it will be part of the public record. So I'm going to alternate between people in the room and people on Zoom. And before you begin, please state your name and your city or town for the public record. To ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to speak, the council limits comments to a maximum of 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, I'll ask you to please finish your sentence. According to council rules, we do not respond during public comment. It is your time to speak, so you should direct your comments to us, but we won't be responding. Our rules also state that councilors and members of the public shall conduct themselves with civility and respect at all times. Your protected speech is a constitutional right, one that we ask you to wield with consideration and respect for all, and with recognition that the public space that grants you that freedom is shared equally by everyone. You may speak on any topic. It doesn't need to be an item that's on the agenda. If you're on Zoom, I ask that all but the council turn off your video until you're called upon. It makes it easier for us to see the councilors, and also only the person recognized has the floor. The meeting can also be watched on Comcast Channel 15 or by streaming on Northampton Open Media's YouTube channel. So we'll start with people in the room. The first person is Marcia, and if you could state your name and city or town. Welcome.
Did I? Yeah, I think I know. Hi, I'm Marcia Morris, and I am here as the Slavery and Christianity Team Co-Chair from College Church. And I also happen to be Commissioner for the Racialized Harm Committee as well. But today, or this evening, I'm talking about the event that we're going to have on Sunday, February 11th at 1 o'clock. This will be our second Black History Month celebration, and this one is going to be focused on Christian abolitionism to white fragility. Our keynote will be Representative Lindsay Sabadosa, and we will have Evelyn Harris from Sweet Honey, formerly of Sweet Honey in the Rock, performing. We're going to focus in on two slave songs, one slave song, and one civil rights song. So both can be found in the Library of Congress. We will also have our local historian, librarian, Elise Bernier-Feely, coming to speak about the roots of Christian abolitionism as it is found in and grew out from Florence and Northampton. And those roots were the roots that spread throughout the country. And she's going to avail us of some stories about how that was done. And we also will have one of the the group Bamba de Aquí, which was a group that also performed at the First Night Festival. And they are going to be doing Bamba, Puerto Rican Bamba, as it relates to the slaves that were dropped off through that Caribbean area. And it depended on who was colonizing what little islands. And so Puerto Rico, as we know, was colonized originally by the Spaniards. And so when the slaves were dropped off, there was a marriage of music. So we will be having African drums. We'll be having African drums, and then the flamenco dance as and what's special about Bamba is that as usually people dance when they hear music, but Bamba, the drums follows the dancers, and the dancers dress and their hands. So it's really going to be a spectacular event. We hope that people from all over the community will come. You will be home in time for the Super Bowl, because I know it's Super Bowl weekend, so you don't have to worry about that.
And that's time, so if you could just finish your sentence.
I'm sorry?
That was your time, so if
Okay.
you could finish your sentence.
I was just about to do that. So with that, I say thank you for the time, and everyone have a good evening.
Thank you. And what is your city or town residence?
Oh, Northampton.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Zoom and Tina White. Tina, I've asked you to unmute. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. I appreciate this chance to talk to you. My name is Christina White, and I live in Florence. I have spoken before, so I will keep it brief. I wanted to say that I hope you will vote tonight to accept the bylaw without weakening it with any amendments. I appreciate so much the work that Carolyn Misch and her team have done to make this a great new bylaw, and both the legislative matters previous and current iterations have worked really hard and have listened really hard, and I appreciate that. The planning board and the many community members who have spoken and really impressed me with their devotion to making this new bylaw that will be good for the community including the people, but also the birds, the bats, the insects, the trees, and all other creatures that are in Northampton. I hope that Northampton will be viewed as a leader going forward in community care with this new bylaw. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tina. Next, in person, Stephen Callahan.
I don't know, is this live?
Is it green?
Green. Yeah.
Yes, you're
Hi, I'm Steve Callahan. I'm Northampton, Massachusetts. I've lived here 44 years, paying house taxes for the past 44 years without ever having missed one, although I found out that I missed one this past time, and that's probably because as a senior citizen, I get the newspaper so I can see what day of the week it is, and I have problems with memory, and if I have a bill and it's due within 29 days, 30 days, I pay it. I always pay it. So I went to the tax collector and I said, well, who voted this change? And they said, well, nobody voted the change. It was an administrative decision with the mayor, the finance director, and I assume the tax collector. And so I said, well, maybe I was the only person who was affected by this, because, with memory issues, but I would like to know if it's caused a problem for other people, whether it's increased the amount of interest penalties, because I had to pay a $49 interest penalty for having missed this bill. And I asked, well, can you at least evaluate whether the changes in the billing procedure has led to an increase for, maybe particularly senior citizens who were, not able to sort of stay on top of this. The tax collector said that actually she would have a difficult time coming up and getting me that kind of information, which I found a little bit difficult to believe. But I would like to at least maybe have the city council, if they still have a finance committee, take a look at it and evaluate what the impact was of it. I know they saved $20,000, by cutting down on the mailing. But if you want to collect taxes 3 times a year, send bills 3 times a year. But if you want to collect it quarterly, I think, the fairest way, the only way I've ever paid a bill, I think, for everybody in the country is, with 30 days' notice, and I think the city should return to that. But I would at least like the city council to look at it and have the finance people take a look and see if there are any negative aspects as well as the cost savings. Thank you.
Thank you. Next in person, Nick Mautern.
Yes, good evening. My name is Nick Mautern. I live at 16 Strong Avenue in Northampton. And I'm here once again to urge the City Council to pass a resolution endorsing a ceasefire in the conflict in Gaza and the West Bank. I've been here now 2 times before. At this point, one of my colleagues, Peter Kakos, has drafted a suggested resolution that I will give to you. And I hope that you will act very quickly on this. I'm estimating there's probably been at least 3,000 people killed over there since the last time I was here at this meeting. And I know that Reverend Kakos has been in touch, or has been trying to be in touch with Councilman Dubs about this. So I'd like to give you all a copy of his resolution and hope that you'll be able to take this up and act on it at your next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Andre? Andrea, I'm sorry. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Andrea Fox. I live in Ward 2 in Northampton, and I'm here to speak about Northampton Fire Department tonight. And on January 28th, I sent a letter to some of you. I sent the 2 at-large, the council president, Mary Ann Labarge, our mayor, and my counselor, Ward 2. And I had asked that it also be forwarded to the Public Safety Committee, but I'm not sure you guys even have a Public Safety Committee anymore. But if you do, I would love for them to have it, because I tried going through the city to find out who was on it, and I never got a response. So anyways, thank you for letting me speak. I wanted to just first of all commend our professional and dedicated and well-trained fire department, and say that they have come to my home, they've come to my neighbors' homes when they've been called. And as you may have been aware, Northampton Fire has steadily increased their number of responses over the course of the last 4 years. Based on information collected by Northampton Firefighters Local 108, in 2023, our fire department set new records by responding to over 700 calls for service totaling 9,147 calls in that 1 year. Most concerning is that the department has not had a staffing increase for almost 2 decades. That's a long time. With the increased call volume and no change in staffing, there's overlapping calls, and they've become more and more common on a daily basis. This has required that our city rely on mutual aid, causing a delay sometimes in 911 response to our community, call volume, time on scene, weather, and variable nature and acuity of a call, plus the time in transport, restocking, returning to the city when out of Northampton to travel, must all be factored into a safe and effective staffing model. When any person needing public safety or medical assistance in Northampton calls 911, barring exigent circumstances, we expect and should receive a prompt response from Northampton Fire. It is time that our city recognizes that the Northampton Fire Department has reached a critical low and that staffing that worked 2 decades ago needs review, revision, and improvement. We need more staffing. So I'll jump ahead to the end since my time is up, and I'll just say that I strongly and respectfully request that within your elected roles, please act and address the growing and emergent needs of the fire department so Northampton can move into 2024 with the department equipped to meet the complex challenges of our growing community. I encourage you to work collaboratively with all fire department members to find suitable solutions to these issues, and I look forward to hearing back from you about your thoughts and ideas on how to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is James Lowenthal.
Good evening. I'm James Lowenthal. I live at 181 Crescent Street in Northampton. I am the leader of Northampton City Lights, a citizens group that supports best practices in outdoor lighting to reduce light pollution and protect natural darkness at night for human health and safety, wildlife, the economy, and the starry night sky, one of nature's most precious gifts. I'm here to speak in favor of 23-349, the outdoor lighting ordinance. 7 of us addressed the Legislative Matters Committee meeting on Monday as well. This ordinance would replace our current lighting ordinance, which is almost 20 years old and long overdue for updating. Northampton has adopted the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting at night. This ordinance is consistent with those principles. Dark Sky, Massachusetts has developed a template lighting bylaw for cities and towns. This ordinance is consistent with that template as well. There are over 55 cities and towns in Massachusetts that have light pollution bylaws. Ours would not be the most progressive or restrictive, but it would make significant progress towards limiting harmful glare, excessive blue light, uncontrolled light that causes light pollution, and its many ill effects. It's a good bylaw. It's gone through extensive revisions and vetting. It's got some compromises that are all reasonable and well considered. I urge you to approve the bylaw without weakening any of its substance. It's a win-win. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, remotely, is Gwen. Gwen, if you could state your name and city or town.
Hello, my name is Gwen Nabad, and I live in New Hampshire Heights in Northampton. And I am here because I absolutely support dark skies and any kind of bylaw that's going to, help bring the dragonflies back. And also, I would also like to feel that Northampton's low-income communities could also be somehow tied up in that, because I know the state takes care of its own property. And we have excessive lighting where we live, and I wish there could be a better solution. And so I ask, in consideration of any changes or updates or anything with dark skies, if there's some way that there could be some solidarity with low-income communities who deal with glaring lights. I think just by the stigma of our low-income communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in person or remotely who would like to speak? Come on up and state your name and city or town.
Thank you. I'm Don Darnell. I live in Northampton. And some of you have heard from me before. I represent, or I'm a part of this volunteer group at Village Hill, the Healthy Lighting Committee. I just want to reiterate what I've said before, that I think this, and I guess I would echo what Dr. Lowenthal, I think, was saying earlier. He's said it very well, that the The amendment that's before you, I think, reflects a great deal of careful scrutiny and several iterations and careful thought about multiple constituencies. I agree that there are some compromises. It's not the, it doesn't lead to the perfect light pollution control law, but I think it's a really good. I think it's really good language in the end, and I'm really grateful for the counselors, especially the members of the Legislative Matters Committee, who put so much energy into it. I've done some work in the past on light pollution and outdoor lighting policy in general with other elected officials like yourselves and with lighting engineers for a much larger community, a city of over 1 million people. And so I've been involved with these kind of city council meetings in that context. I've never seen anywhere near so many people show up to voice their support for this kind of regulation. It's normally a big nerdy, big yawn kind of issue, right? Like, who wants to hear about this? And so it's not the kind of thing that people are going to give up dinner with their family or take time to leave early from work or whatever in order to address. I feel very moved by that and excited that people are willing to come up and speak, and I think it speaks to the community's willingness to support that kind of change. So I urge you to support this. I think it's very good language, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak for public comment? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Jason Young. I live in Northampton. I work at UMass as a research astronomer, and I do a lot of my work down in Texas, and it's a very dark location by design or by choice, but it's been getting progressively brighter every year until last year, the last time I went there, where my measurement showed it was just slightly better. And I asked them about it, and they said, well, the main source of light pollution is an industrial complex about 100 miles north that's mostly oil derricks. And they've been working with them to mitigate stray light. And so if I can offer some perspective, if a bunch of oil companies in Texas can make headway on this, it's very practical for us to do at least as good. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, thank you all very much. Really appreciate public comment. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is announcements from councilors and the mayor. And here's where, because we have some councilors remote and some councilors in person, speak up if I'm not noticing you in one of those formats. Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I just wanted to announce the Regional Agricultural Conference, the Pioneer Valley Regional Agricultural Conference, this Saturday, February 3rd, from 9 a.m. to noon. Doors opening at 8:30 at Smith Voke and Agricultural School Library inside the Smith Voke School. And there's going to be three great speakers: Tom Jenkins from the Blue Dog Forestry, Lori Cuevas from the Thomas Farm and Dairy, and Missy Lieb from the Valley Farm. And I went last year, and it was really compelling. It's a great way to meet the people who are feeding you, and they really have great muffins. But that's an aside. So anyway, 9 a.m. to noon, Smith Voke this Saturday. I'll be there. I know other councils will be there. We'll be happy to talk to you. So I hope we see you there.
Thank you. Councilor Rothenberg.
As with every month, the Ward 3 Neighborhood Association, which is a group of anyone who lives in Ward 3, and Chairwoman Morris, I think you are in Ward 3, is going to be meeting on the second Tuesday of the month on Zoom. And you can Google us. You can find Ward 3 Neighborhood Association with the Zoom link. We start at 7, we end at 8:30. And it's an open place for everybody in the public, even if you're not from our ward, to come in and sort of brainstorm with us, kind of like a mini community resources committee, but just for Ward 3. And I certainly will be reporting back to them about this event on the 11th that we just learned about, where Rep. Sabadosa is going to be your keynote speaker. And we'd love to hear from everyone else about what you're doing in Ward 3 and what you'd like to see in Ward 3 and how you're doing in Ward 3. So give us a search online, Ward 3 Neighborhood Association, and everyone's welcome.
Thank you. Are there any committee chairs who would like to announce their upcoming meetings? Yeah, Councilor Moulton.
Yes, thank you. City Services will meet on Monday, February 5th at 5 p.m. That is a remote meeting, and we will be taking up the appointment of the auditor that was referred to us earlier in January.
Great. Any others? I can just announce that Legislative Matters will be meeting on the 12th, and we may, assuming they get referred to us, be taking up the ordinances that are on tonight's agenda. Mayor, do you have any announcements for us? Okay, thank you. Then our next item is presentations. We have Finance Director Charlene Nardi here for the fiscal year 2024 second quarter financial report.
Scary. Yeah, if it's okay with everyone, I'll stay here so I can actually put up the documents so that everybody can see them. I'm not coordinated,
Sure.
I think, enough to stand and do that. So good evening, everyone. For those I haven't met, my name is Charlene Nardi. I'm the Finance Director. I think we actually did get a brief chance to meet when we were on tour a couple weeks ago, but hello, and thank you for having me tonight. I'm here to report the second quarter financials. I provided you 5 reports. The first 2 are for revenue, general fund revenues and enterprise revenues, and the other 2 are for the expenses for each of those, the general fund and the enterprise expenses. And then the 5th one I provided is a kind of a deeper dive on our local revenues, which is our hotel, motel, meals, and cannabis. So if I may share my screen,
Yes,
I will bring
please.
up the first, which is called General Fund share. Second quarter general fund revenues. Can everybody see that? All right, I need to get rid of this because I can't see. So I can no longer see all of you on Zoom, so forgive me. So looking at this report, the easiest way to tell how the city is doing for the second quarter, the quick way is to look at the column all the way to the right, which says it's a percent column. And if you think about we're 50% through the year, that's where you want to look. So you want to see the number 50 or higher to see that we're doing well. And to go through a little deeper, so if we look at the first page and you look at the tax revenue, the first 2 lines, you'll see we're slightly below 50%. And the reason for that is the city bills quarterly, and the first 2 bills that you get in your first mailing are actually preliminary bills, so they aren't the full tax that you will receive. So there's a higher percentage, greater than 50%, for your second 2 quarterly bills in the spring. So that's why we're a little below the 50%. As we move down, you'll see motor vehicle excise. If you notice, it's only at 19.2%. That is because the bulk of the excise tax bills are mailed out in February, and we receive that revenue in March. So that's why that's low. But you'll see at quarter 3, at the end of quarter 3, that will be much higher. If we go down and then you look at, excuse me, hotel motel, we're at 88%. That at $688,000, that is running ahead of our budget. It's an increase of 30% over last fiscal year, which is good news. We saw in 2023 that had rebounded. We actually pushed up the revenue projection in FY 2024, but it's still exceeding that projection. So it's something that we will be looking at for FY 2025. Meals revenue, and if you look at that, that's at, excuse me, we're looking at the actual year-to-date revenue, which is the actual fifth column, I guess, from the top. It's labeled actual year-to-date revenue, and I'm going down that one. So if you look at the meals, that's at $407,000, and it is at 62% of our revenue projections. It is about the same amount that we had at this time last year, but you'll see a lower percentage because, again, the mayor pushed that revenue because we saw it increasing in FY 2023. So the next one is the cannabis. If you look at that line item, you'll see it's at $437,000. And that's at 58% of our budget line. And remember, for the new counselors, if you are not aware, that was a line that has been dropping, and we have been dropping it every year, trying to find where that's going to land. I think we may be in a better position because we are ahead of our budget projection, but as you'll see when I pull up the other PDF, we are about the same place we were last year at this time. If we look at the bottom of the page, we start with, did I actually detail those? We go to the parking revenues. It starts with those, and then if you go to page 2, if you add up those first 6 lines, which goes down to mobile app, or excuse me, Union Station, parking, we have actually collected $868,223, which is 71% of the projected revenue. So, as the mayor showed in the presentation on Tuesday, the first 2 quarters of parking has significantly increased than what we've been seeing the last couple of years. So that is starting to come back, and I do think, as the mayor said, it's a combination of things. It's the economic team doing what it can to bring people back to the city, and it's also, I think, maybe a reflection of, not that the parking changes were intended to bring revenue, but that may be also a case where people are not on Main Street as much and moving to different areas of the city. So, and we are also capturing the 6 to 8 p.m. Fees as well, or parking. Then if you look at the, next to that, the ambulance services, that continues to increase. It's at 59.6% of the projected budget. It is slightly above, or 4.7% greater than it was at the same time last year. Then if you continue down page 2, we look at the charges for services, and these are all the categories that were in the mayor's presentation last night, where she showed you the percent of the budget that they make up. So charges for services, looking at the last column, because most of these are pretty small. The biggest one you'll see there is the tuition for Smith Voc. That's a pass-through, and the tuition is low. They bill 3 times a year, so you're only seeing 1/3 of the total there. But the rest of those are fairly low, and we're at a good position with all of them. But if you take out that $6 million for, the $9 million for Smith Voc, there's not a whole lot there that we haven't collected, but the Smith Voc makes that percentage low. Licenses and permits, if we go to page 3, did I go too fast? Whoops, there we go. Most are all looking really good. They're running above the 50% collected amounts, and I expect that those that aren't will catch up in the spring. These amounts are similar to the same time period in prior years, and the overall section is running ahead of projections at 71%. And then if we look at the state revenues, which are at the bottom of page 3, these are the cherry sheets that we talk about state level. Those come in when they come in. They usually come in pretty much on the quarter. So you should see them within the 50% area, or percent collected. And then if we go to parking tickets, as you can see, we are a little ahead of our projected amounts there at 79.6%. This budget line projection was dropped last year, or from last year. It was dropped from 525,000 to 480,000. So that is why you're seeing an increase in the percentage over last year. So overall, if you look at the total, the grand total at the bottom, we've collected 52 million, and that's 47% of our budget. So we are on target. It's about the same place we are every year at this time. And we can talk a little more. If you would like, I'll bring up that sheet that former Council President Nash developed, or asked to be developed, which goes in a little deeper to meals tax and hotel, motel, and cannabis. So if you look at this sheet, and can everyone see, it's kind of difficult to get it all on there.
Can you scooch it that way?
Oh, yes, I can. Maybe. If I can get rid of this. Okay. So if you look at meals tax, just that section, the first 2 quarters, we are about at the same place we were for the first 2 quarters of last year. So this amount here adds up to about the same. I think they're $1,000 off a little bit. So we were about the same we were last year for meals. And then I think the big one that we want to talk about is the traditional hotel lodgings, which is significantly higher than it was last year at this time. I mean, right now you're looking at 688,000, and here you were looking at 525,000 at the same time. So those have increased significantly, and those will be pushed in FY 2025 to capture that revenue as a use for the city. If I move to the right, cannabis, again, you can see that has dropped just a bit, but it's still kind of in line with the first 2 quarters of last year. So again, we've been dropping the projection for this line to find out where that new sweet spot is for that. And then in the top corner of this is the short-term rentals, and this is your Airbnbs. And it is, slightly higher, but not by much in this. And I'm sorry, for the new folks, when you look at this, what we're doing is we're actually taking our revenue and then we're projecting out what the state tax was at their percentages. The percentages are in the top. So for instance, if we're talking about meals tax, the city, it's a local option tax. We take 0.75%, and then the estimated state tax, which is at 6.25%. These are the numbers that they're collecting based on, we're calculating they're collecting based on what we've collected. And then the estimated total sales is in that last column for each section. So that's how this PDF works for those who might be seeing it for the first time. So then if we go to the enterprise funds, these revenues are in good shape. Everything is tracking as expected and is on target to meet the budget projections. Sewer is 5% higher than last year, and water is 8% higher than this same time last year. However, as we all know, Coca-Cola is operating, not at full strength, but they are still operating, but they are targeted to end sometime during this year. So it will be interesting to see how we end the year with those. Stormwater is the same as last year at this time, so I'm sorry, let's look at it. And again, we're only slightly ahead, which is concerning. Stormwater is in the 50% area, and so is solid waste. So those are both looking, all four of those are looking good. If we move to expenses, the general fund expenses, again, the way you want to look at expenses is now we don't want 50% or higher, we want 50% or lower, because we want to stay within our budget. So if you look at these, looking through quickly, for the most part, everybody's below 50%. If you see higher percentages in the hundreds, that's usually because they are accounts that pay the bulk of it up front. So for instance, I'm trying to think, like, if you move to the back part of it, if you look at our, excuse me, I'm going to run through, so I hope I don't make anybody sick. If you go to our insurances, you will see that we pay most of those up front. So like our contributory retirement, that has been paid all at once. So you'll see we're close to 100% there. Workers' comp, all those kind of insurances, we pay in July. So you'll see higher percentages. You're going to see low percentages in the DPW areas. Those are mostly because most of their work is done in the spring. So their OM lines will be lower. You'll see, generally, you should see the PS lines, which is the salary lines, you should see them just below the 50% mark, and that's usually because if they are below the 50% mark, those salary lines, it's because they have longevity built in, they have vacancies, or they also have overtime, which is just being expended at a different rate than their normal salaries. But, looking at the PS, which I'll start tracking in February till the end of the year, most of all of them are at the 50% mark. The other lines in salary kind of make it look like they're a little bit below. Trying to think what else would be good to point out. It's still kind of early in the year to say much about the expenses. I think things look good. It looks about the same that we do every year at this time. We kind of dig in a little deeper as we get closer to the end of the year, and we start conversations with departments, certainly if we're seeing any issues, but I don't see any at this time. And then if we look at the enterprise funds, similar report. It's broken up by each of the four enterprise. If you look at them, they are generally, it's kind of like DPW, enterprise projects carry over from year to year, so their percentages don't always work as well. They're not built on the quarterly or sometimes the fiscal year, so their OM expenses will be lower, but you'll see those increase as the year goes on as well. And also, the DPW director encumbers, because her contracts, and I think she tells you this in her tour, is that her contracts do carry over year to year, and so you will see some funds carry where she can encumber them for a project that's already started and a contract that's in place into the next year. So that's why some of her percentages are a bit lower. And that's about the end for my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has on any of the reports.
Great, thank you, Director. Bring up the Zoom screen so I can see if folks have questions. Councilor Moulton.
Thank you, Director Nardi, for your usual detailed report. I wanted to circle back on a couple of things that you highlighted. One is parking revenue, because I looked at it because the mayor did say Tuesday that this fiscal year the parking revenue is finally seeming to rebound to the pre-pandemic levels, and the numbers do seem to bear that out. I was particularly struck, though, by the mobile app revenue, which is already up by 109,000 over what you had forecast, and I'm wondering if that's because the mobile apps are being accepted at more kiosks. Do you have an explanation for why that is up so much?
I do think that I think people are using the mobile app more. They're certainly more comfortable with using it, and I think I need to look at those projections to get them better in line with actual revenue. Overall, we're about this, we see the over. So you think about the parking revenue as a whole, because I budget $1,210,000 for that line. So it's kind of like thought of it as a bulk altogether, but I need to better separate those out into the appropriate lines. So I do think the mobile app is bringing in more, which was expected. I don't think my budget projection shows that, identifies that as well. So I will adjust it, but I do think the mobile app is something that people are using, and Mayor probably has something. Please do.
So we didn't add hours to parking, but we shifted hours,
Yes.
right? So, and I think that that's part of it. So we've shifted the hours. So one of the reasons we did that is because from 8 to 10 a.m., if you were looking out on Main Street, like I would do often, there were many, many spaces that were open. People just aren't, stores aren't open, people aren't parking downtown at that time. So shifting it to 6 to 8 p.m. in the evening and adding those hours at the end of the day, I think is, one, it's captured more people who are actually parking, and I think they're using the app more.
Okay. The other point I want to make, it's not a question, but just to underscore or to back up Director Nardi's cautious optimism on the cannabis revenue. It looks to me like we can say that there's a trend of modest increases. We seem to have bottomed out. Hopefully, we bottomed out about a year ago. But since then, there's been 3 consecutive quarters of, as I say, modest increases. So I think that's a positive sign.
Thank you.
Questions? I will ask some then. Let's see. So yeah, you mentioned about Coca-Cola's, departure, and I wondered if we had numbers, or if that would be something the DPW director would have for their usage. Are we seeing that declining as they predicted, or has there been a change with that?
We are seeing it declining, so we can get the most up-to-date numbers, but we have seen a decrease in their usage every month.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it is significantly dropping.
Right. And you mentioned the lower percentages at the DPW, and you said that's including the PS line. So they do much more personnel work in the spring as well. I was curious also. I know there's been a significant problem with hiring and filling enough shifts. So is some of that also because of the vacancies?
Go ahead.
So no, I was going to say, and I probably didn't explain it well. So there are 2 reasons, though, it could be low, is because we have vacancies. And I was thinking for OM, it's usually for OM is the projects. When you see a low OM that's below, it's because their work is done at a different time of year. But as far as the vacancies, I think we're still working to fill some of those, and I'll let the mayor address that if she has more information.
Yeah, so we're starting to see a reverse in the trend, and we're starting to see more people applying, and we're doing some more hiring, but we still have vacancies.
And what is that a trend you think that's changed just because the market's changing, or have we adapted in some way?
The market, I think, is changing, and I think we've made some adjustments with HR around certain positions that may be helping as well.
Great. Thanks. I think that's all my questions. Any other questions? Don't want to miss anyone. Okay.
I had a comment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so generally, thank you for the presentation, and I'm glad we're asking questions and looking at now. I'm comfortable as Chair of Finance, this being referred to the consent agenda, as we've talked about, and we've talked about in Finance Committee, when we get out of the preliminary stage, like especially the final quarter, we might bring you into Finance, but I'm comfortable tonight having this referred to the consent agenda.
Sorry, what do you mean by referred to the consent?
Oh, I'm sorry, the presentation.
Oh,
itself.
I
We
see.
usually bring her to, we
Right.
sometimes bring the director, bring the whole presentation to finance. I shouldn't say referred, but like, I'm
Yeah,
saying that
yeah.
we don't, I'm not asking for her to come and also present at finance at this point. But I will reserve that for the last, especially the final quarter, just to give you a heads up.
Yeah, in July.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, thank you for that clarification. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And so the consent agenda, if anyone would like, I'm going to read the items that are on the consent agenda, and if any counselors would like any removed so that we can discuss them, they can let me know. They are the minutes of January 18th, 2024, and 24.006, in order to appropriate $34,057 from stabilization for a heat pump hot water heater at the senior center. Would anyone like either of these to be removed? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion made by Counselor Maori and seconded by Counselor Moulton. There is no debate on the consent agenda, and we will need to do a roll call. Laura, when you're ready.
Counselor Dobbs.
Yes.
Counselor Elkins.
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Counselor Moulton.
Yes.
Counselor Pastridge Clemmer.
Yes.
Counselor Perry.
Yes.
And Counselor Rothenberg.
Yes.
So that passes unanimously. And next would be the financial order. Just so people know what I'm thinking as far as order tonight, I would propose that we do the one financial order, and then skip down to the lighting ordinance, and as long as no counselors object to that. So, as we have some people here for the lighting ordinance. So the financial order is 24.011, an order to transfer $72,949 for workers' compensation audit. And Director Nardi, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. So every year, we pay the worker compensation premiums. As I mentioned, we pay them in July. We pay them in full. But then later in the year, usually in March, a workers' compensation audit is done by our insurance company. And that means that they look at our actual payroll and our claims. So looking at that, they have given us a new bill, which usually happens every year, but this particular year, the bill is $94,000. We only have $21,000 remaining in the workers' comp line. If you look at the expenses and look at the workers' comp, which is toward the end, we only have $21,000 left. So this order is asking you to transfer the balance of that amount, which is the $72,549 from other insurance lines. Those are leftover funds that you have already appropriated, but were not used in those insurance lines, to the workers' comp so that I may pay that bill. The increases this year in payroll were the school professionals and the school all other categories. Those were $12,000 and $41,000 respectively. And the smaller increases, which were less than $7,000, were in the transfer station, waterworks, sewer operations, and park and rec departments. We did look at the audit. Because what happens is somebody comes in and actually works with our auditors to pull that payroll. We actually did a double check to make sure those numbers are correct before we pay the invoice. And then also part of that audit is our experience modifications. So right now we sit at 1.32. We will want to be at a 1%. Or a 1, which is the average modification experience, or, what would even be better is we would be below. There is also an all-risk adjustment program, which is a RAP surcharge, which is at 1.24. And that cost the city $20,000 extra. That's part of that $94,000. So just to give you a heads up, so normally, this audit is done every year, but normally we are able to cover this with what's left in the budget, but this year we are not. So I will tell you, as far as these experience modification and the RAP number, we work very hard. The city has quarterly meetings, what we call risk meetings, where we meet with Maya, our insurance agency, and we get together, all the department heads, where our claims are. We work to reduce our premiums by taking trainings. We look at the claims, and we bring in training to help make sure that we're bringing down those claims, and we're not having repeats of those. So I do want you to know that even though this is probably the first time in a long time we've had to come to cover this, that the city department heads are working very hard together quarterly to make sure that we are reducing our claims and dealing with those, because those are within our control. So we're working hard to do that. So tonight, I'm asking you to transfer the $72,949 from existing accounts into the workers' comp so that we may pay this invoice.
Thank you. Questions? Councilor Rothenberg.
Did we receive a breakdown of the charges of the 94,000?
Yes. So we receive a breakdown, an audit. Well, we went through and saw what backed that up, what the payroll was, and as I explained, like where the increases in payroll were. Yes.
So, well, I'm just trying to understand, because I didn't look. Did you send us a breakdown of?
No, I did not.
Okay, so it's an audit.
Mm-hmm.
It's 94,000, but part of it is also for that training and the mitigation work, or?
No, maybe I'm sorry if I didn't explain well. So I just wanted you to know that the audit is done, and then they charge us. Basically, it's an audit of FY 2023, and then they increase our premium based on our actual payrolls and our claims.
Okay, so that's separate, not related to just the cost of the audit. So my question is, this audit.
It's an increase in premium, not the cost of the audit.
Oh, the audit is not 94,000?
No, it's the increased premium.
Okay.
Based on our actual payrolls and our claim experience.
Resulting from the audit?
Yes, yes.
Okay, got it.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, I'm so sorry.
Any other questions? So we have the option to refer this to the Finance Committee or to the consent agenda of our next meeting. Councilor Labarge?
Yes, I'd like to move this to the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Moulton. Any discussion on referring this to the consent agenda of our next meeting? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Pastrick Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
And Councilor Dobbs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that passes unanimously. So with councilors' permission, I would like to move down to zoning ordinances. Okay. 23.349, an ordinance to amend Chapter 350-12.2 outdoor lighting. So this has a very long history. I'll just give an update from what happened since we referred it on January 4th to Legislative Matters. Legislative Matters held a public hearing and positively recommended the ordinance with the retention of the 0 to 2700 Kelvin standard for outdoor lighting, including streetlights, the retention of the original 202 bug rating for the CB Core District, and the addition of provision for a waiver of streetlight standards in specific circumstances. And yes, that. So those were the recommendations. And Director Mish, are you with us tonight?
Yes.
Yep. Let's see if she's.
That same here.
Great, welcome. So would you like to speak to any of these changes, or should we just, or would you like to just take questions?
Well, I think probably the only change, right, is the added waiver. So I'd be happy to explain that and then take questions. So the additional language about the waiver, and I'm sorry, I think, does that have the additional language that just came in this afternoon as well?
Both are listed on the agenda.
Okay.
But perhaps we should, if you want to just explain it as recommended, and then we can take the amendment that's proposed on the floor.
Great. So the recommended language that was came out of Legislative Matters was to add more specificity to any kind of waiver requests that would be made for the purposes of installing streetlights on public ways. And so at the very top of the ordinance, top of the lighting ordinance, there's a general waiver language that states that all the standards within the lighting chapter can be reviewed by the planning board site plan review process, and the planning board may opt to grant waivers. But this language specifically that was added gives more clarity and definition as to for the planning board in making such determinations and waivers for for streetlights on public ways. And so the way it came out of Legislative Matters was that the waiver could be granted by the planning board through a site plan review if and only if necessary to improve pedestrian safety on pedestrian ways or crosswalks, and modifications are consistent with Dark Sky International and Illuminating Engineering Society guidance. And there, in that conversation at Legislative Matters, there was also a vote to move language that spells out more specifics if the municipality, if Northampton was requesting a waiver for a project that would create substantial financial impact to the city. And so that's the additional language that conceptually was voted on Monday, but the specificity was not there. And so Councillor Elkins, I think, was charged to look at that language, and that's why it came this afternoon.
Great, thank you. So if we could take general questions about the ordinance before we get into the amendment. If anyone has general questions about the ordinance that's before us, let's take those first. Anyone have those? And we are not taking comments from the public at this time. Councilor Moulton.
Yes, thank you. The only question I had was following up on Monday night's discussion at Legislative Matters about the question of the Kelvin rating for streetlights as part of the Main Street reconstruction. Do you have any ballpark estimate on how much money that those streetlights are going to cost?
I don't at this time.
Okay.
We will likely know that later in the spring.
Okay.
But at this point, it hasn't been set.
Okay, and again, just to be clear, it is uncertain whether the state would cover the cost for the streetlights, no matter what the Kelvin rating is, whether it's 3,000 or 2,700. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Other general questions about the ordinance? Okay. So we will need, before we do amendments, we will need a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Counselor Moulton, seconded by Counselor Perry to approve the ordinance. So now we can continue to discuss the ordinance, and we can also entertain any amendments to the ordinance. Counselor Elkins.
I would move to amend, and the language is, I think is included on the agenda, the page, the waiver language that's in the box under, on page, sorry, I didn't have it all up.
Page 9.
Page 9, thank you. One step ahead. So there is a box with some waiver language underneath the chart of the bug ratings. And in this language is proposed as being sort of responsive to the concerns that we discussed in legislative matters about giving the planning board some discretion to grant a waiver based on costs to the city at a specific, and of course we're talking about Main Street, but this would apply to any municipally funded project that would allow basically that if a cost concern arose because of the standards, that the planning board would have an option to, the planning board could, a waiver, I'm really sorry guys, I'm not all here tonight and I don't really have all the words. But there was concern whether or not there could be kind of an escape hatch or a way for the city to seek a waiver from the by right standards if there was going to be a kind of extraordinary expense to the municipality. It's not a waiver that's available to developers generally. It's available just on city projects.
So I'll second that, and Laura, if you could bring up on the screen the exact language, and I'd be happy to read it.
And
So-
when you're done, I'll be happy to answer questions of people about the specific language.
Great. And could you zoom in a little bit, Laura? Thank you. So it reads, and this is replacing what's in the box on page 9, waivers from streetlight standards on public ways may be granted by the planning board after a site plan review procedure if and only if necessary to improve pedestrian safety on pedestrian ways or crosswalks, or in the case of municipally funded projects, costs to the city to meet the by right standards will be extraordinary. Waivers granted to the city for extraordinary costs must be supported by 1, evidence that design, procurement, and installation costs to comply with by right standards are more than 50% more than costs associated with the non-compliant design. I think we want to strike the second more there. So it's with by right standards are more than 50% than costs associated with the non-compliant design, or 2, demonstrated loss of alternative funding for the project. All modifications granted through waivers must be consistent with Dark Sky International and Illuminating Engineering Society guidance. In no case shall a waiver be granted that increases the color temperature above 3000 K or more than 1 backlight or glare rating above the by right standard for the relevant zoning district. See table above. No waiver shall be granted for any increase in the uplight rating. So this amendment is now on the floor. And are there questions for Marissa Elkins? Councilor Rothenberg.
Good evening. I'm wondering, I do think that you're more than 50% more than is correct. I don't think you have to change that language. syntactically. But what I'm wondering about, Councilor Elkins, and this feels a little bit like we're having a charge conference, because let's talk about how we might change the language. It's part of my question to sort of actively craft this with you. You're talking about extraordinary costs, but the language here is really just talking about a scale, right, 50%, or it's talking about losing something. And it really doesn't bring us to necessarily extraordinary costs, right? Because on a small scale, that wouldn't be extraordinary necessarily. So would there be a better way to phrase it so that extraordinary means something more than, maybe in addition to, or different than just the 50%? In other words, you know, $1 versus $2 only makes a difference when we're talking about a lot of dollars. And the way this was floated to me was that it was trying to spare us from doing something like spending $1 million extra, right? Which only makes sense if this applies to something at a great scale. But if this is a small project, and it's the difference between a neighborhood having a light that they like or a light that they don't like, and it's not actually an extraordinary amount of money, the city could still get an exemption as long as they met this 50% more or demonstrated they lose alternative funding, even if it's not an extraordinary amount of money. Do you see what I mean?
I guess I do. I mean, I added the 50% more and the demonstrated loss of alternative funding was meant to give some guidance to the planning board as to what would be triggered. The other thing to keep in mind is that the ability is that the motivation for the city to go before the planning board with a for a waiver request, I think would be a kind of a self-limiting proposition. The reasons it would be an extraordinary, a significant amount of money at difference between this. So I don't think the city is going to go to planning board if it doesn't have to for a waiver that's not that's not a significant amount of money. I think they would just comply with the by right standards. So this is meant to give the audience that I was that I was thinking about in writing this was the planning board, who throughout this process has said again and again when we were in legislative matters, give us some guidance. If we're going to have a waiver and it's going to be before us in the planning board, tell us how we should be weighing this. So this was my attempt to put some some meaningful parameters around it that they would find useful. If you have an alternative, a suggestion as to what would be a better number than 50%,
I just wonder if maybe we should put some kind of a floor on it, like a dollar amount. So a third parameter is 50% as long as it's over, $200,000 or whatever would be the figure that would draw. You think there's a figure that would draw the planning board to come ask the planning department to ask for this exception? And I'm wondering if we can sort of better pinpoint what that figure is, because you make the representation that they won't come asking for an exception if they don't have to, but this legislation doesn't prevent them from getting an exception even for a very small project. And, Carolyn Mish, we may have how she feels about it now, but as far as drafting legislation that will last, I think we should have some kind of a figure that actually reflects extraordinary costs, not just a ratio.
I don't think that we're going to be able to, these kinds of planning board review questions are on a case-by-case basis. Like every project is different. So I don't know how we could put a floor on it.
Okay, well, I guess my last question then, just to close that line of questioning, is whether it's possible for us to ask because as you said, you had the planning department in mind. I have the advocates.
No, I had the planning board in mind.
Okay, I have the advocates in mind with my question. Thank you. Sorry for that. Thank you for correcting me. I'm wondering, Mr. President, if it would be possible for us to recognize and inquire of James Lowenthal if he's happy with the amendment language, because I would like to know before I cast my vote.
Thank you for that. So that would require a motion to recognize and a vote of the council. Before we do that, I would like to hear from Director Mish, if you have any input on the idea of a floor, of a dollar figure that would be appropriate for this amendment.
I don't. I mean, it's really a moving target. So if we're talking about an ordinance that's going to last into the future, the values obviously will be different in the future than they are today. So if you're talking about like a specific dollar amount in that regard, I think that would be difficult. I would say that there's sort of, you can look at this as a two-step review, right? The planning board's going to have the language, and the applicant, in this case the city, would have to make would have to support with evidence that this is going to be an extraordinary expense to the city, whatever that might be, and 50% more. So it's not one or the other. And I think that, if you had a small project, maybe it was a one-off or half a block that the streetlights were changing, that's going to be a much smaller dollar figure already right there. So, I think the scale of that is going to bring everything down, and it might be harder to argue anyway that that's going to be an extraordinary expense for the city to meet that. Typically, when streetlights are replaced, it's really on a bigger scale than just a small project. And so that's where you see the difference in cost.
Great, thank you. So do you have interest in making a motion to recognize James Lowenthal?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to recognize James Lowenthal to get feedback on this amendment.
Second?
Okay, motion made by Councilor Rothenberg, seconded by Councilor Maori. Any discussion on recognizing? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yeah.
Councilor Maori.
Yes. Yes.
Your bank.
Yes.
Councilor Bolton.
Yes.
Councilor Patrick Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
Councilor Dobbs.
Yes.
And Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Welcome, Dr. Lowenthal. You have been recognized.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the vote of confidence. I came prepared to answer many, many questions, but this is not one of them, unfortunately. I don't know. It seems like a good idea. I like your idea, and it occurred to me as well when reading the proposed amendment. There certainly is a difference between 50% being 50 cents and 50% being $500,000. And I think you're absolutely right. That is the question before you. I don't know how to answer that question, though. So my personal feeling is I thought Councilor Elkins' proposed amendment was good, and I would be happy to see it passed. I would be happy to see it improved as well, but it's not a hill that I would die on personally.
Councilor Maori?
Yeah, no, I just had a point. Can we ask James?
Yes.
We can ask him and other questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Not just about that one question, right. Well, I don't, except I don't really want to switch subjects, but now that we have him, but we can come back to that, pin on that. We got a late email talking about the correlated color temperature limit as an addition, a potential addition to the, in sections, you can't probably see, section 6, where it says no new bulbs may exceed lumen levels prescribed herein. The suggestion to amend that to say no new bulbs may exceed lumen levels nor correlated color temperature limits, 2700 K, prescribed herein.
So We have an amendment on the floor.
Yeah.
So I think we need, until that amendment is voted on.
Right.
We should stick to that, but James stays recognized.
But he can stay recognized.
Yeah,
I just don't want to lose James.
No, we will not lose James,
let
as
him
long as you
leave.
don't leave.
All right.
Only.
Because, yeah, this is something that came late, so I didn't have a chance to do my due diligence before, but as long as we won't lose you, we can go back to this. And I have a point of clarification I wanted about the amendment.
Yeah.
Well, Director Mish said, did she say that, did she say it said and? Because it says or. Let me find it again. No, I'm confused. I thought she said it's both.
It's both.
It's both, but then it
both
says.
extraordinary and
But it says
one of the two.
I think, Councilor Maori, she's saying extraordinary is the first step, and then the second step is one or two.
Got it. I thought she was saying that after design, that was supposed to say and a demonstrated loss. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on where the and the or were. Thank you. It's amazing how much an and or can change something.
Thank you. So further discussion on the amendment.
I think
Councilor Rothenberg.
if we could have maybe a 5-minute recess, I can just think about if there's one word or something that could be added to address this concern that I have about the language.
Yep, we will, a recess must be granted when asked for, and the length is 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that,
Welcome back. We are continuing to consider 23.349, an ordinance to amend outdoor lighting. And we are considering an amendment. Councilor Rothenberg?
Could you put the language back on the screen?
Laura, would you be able to do that? And would you mind just, again, zooming in a little bit?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Waivers granted to the city may be granted to the city for costs that are extraordinary by contemporary standards and must be supported by. Would be my proposal.
So you're looking at the second sentence, and it currently reads, waivers granted to the city for extraordinary costs must be supported by. And could you say your proposed language again?
I think it's something like, waivers may be granted to the city for costs deemed to be extraordinary by contemporary standards and must be supported by, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm taking that from sort of model jury instructions that are actually for indecent assault and battery, when they ask the jury to understand and describe for themselves and decide for themselves, what does indecent mean? There's no definition of that because that changes over time. So that's how Massachusetts has dealt with that.
Okay, and could you stop the screen sharing just so we can see the folks on Zoom? Okay, so reactions to Councilor Rothenberg's suggested language change.
As a
Councilor Elkins.
As a sponsor, as a person putting forward the proposed amendment, I don't think that language is necessary. I don't think it adds anything. The planning board will gauge extraordinary within the common meaning of the word, and it will be coupled with some clear-cut parameters that they can use to gauge it. So I think we invest we invest in the planning board to some discretion, and that's part of the job, and that this gives them the guidance that they need. And I don't think this adds it. So I don't think it's necessary.
Councilor Labarge.
I do not have a problem with the language that Councilor Elkins has put in place. Dealing with the planning board for many years, I understand her language very, very well. I do not have a problem with it. But I also want to thank the councilor from Ward 3 for coming forth about her suggestions.
Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I just, could Director Mish weigh in as well?
Director Mish?
I think the language as presented originally speaks to sort of specificity. I don't know that the proposed language, would alter that. I really think it's just up to the council to decide how they want it viewed. I think either way. I mean, I think I don't think it's a substantive change that would, alter one way or the other. I think it's probably a preference.
I would add that if we're considering guidance on what is extraordinary, that we may want to consider a minimum dollar amount rather than the language that Councilor Rothenberg proposed. I understand that minimum dollar amounts change over time because of inflation, so they actually become less, generally. So I would be curious as to Councilor's thoughts on should there be a minimum dollar amount and what that amount might be, if so. Councilor Elkins.
So just to reiterate what I said, I don't think a minimum dollar amount is appropriate here because every project is different, and so what will be extraordinary for one project is going to vary by another, and a strict dollar amount is I think going to be outdated and potentially obsolete just as soon as we write it. So Councilor Rothenberg has gone back to criminal law, which is a little unusual, but as long as that's come up, I would point out that it was a felony in Massachusetts to steal more than $249 up until relatively recent, and that was a very low standard across the country. So that's just an example of how if we write it, as soon as we write a number in, it will become potentially irrelevant or not particularly well suited or apt to whatever the particular project is. The nature of planning board is considering individual projects against general standards. So I think specific dollar amounts is not particularly helpful in that context.
Councilor Elkins, while I have you, so do you served on the planning board. How would you go about determining what is extraordinary? If someone brought a $10,000 project, we probably can all say that having that go to less than, or that wouldn't be considered an extraordinary burden to the city. But 100,000 and the increased costs therein would be or could be considered. Do you think that the planning board could just exercise its discretion in that case and figure out where that extraordinary line is?
I do. I trust them to do that. And even if a $10,000 project sounds not particularly big potatoes, if you talk about I don't know, potatoes is not the word I was looking for, but but under the circumstances, whatever particular project it is, if the lighting alone adds just the lighting portion of it adds, tips it out of the line item that was approved for the capital improvement project, or that has to be has to come before council to ask for more money, then it may within the context of that project count as extraordinary. I think the planning board will be grateful for the 50% standard and the loss of demonstrable loss of alternative funding as something to guide them. I mean, if the city's just going to come and just be like, it costs us X numbers of dollars more, the planning board also weighed in on this legislation and, or have the discretion to not approve it. They can not approve the waiver. They can not approve it even if it's more than 50%, even if it handles those requirements. So I think, the planning board weighs these things all the time, and they're particularly well suited to do it on a case-by-case basis in a way that we aren't in writing this legislation.
Thank you. Councilor Rothenberg.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear up what I think maybe some confusion that I caused. I'm not as concerned about whether or not the planning board can define extraordinary. I mean, even my proposed language really is just asking for them to find that it's extraordinary before they go on to find one of the other two things, because I do think this language is unclear. It looks like you are defining extraordinary costs as one or the other thing that you've listed here, not saying, as is the spirit of it, as you and Department Head Minch have said, you want it to be a two-step process. First, they find it's extraordinary, then they find one of these other things. So if everyone, as long as everyone is clear that they feel that this language gets that across, that's the only thing that I was concerned about. Waivers granted to the city for extraordinary costs must be supported by evidence. So extraordinary costs must be supported by, as long as everyone's okay that that's not going to be interpreted down the line as extraordinary costs will be defined by evidence. As long as you feel that that must be supported by is strong enough to tap the brakes and make sure they're meeting extraordinary as the first prong before they get to the other. I have no problem with the language. And it sounds like some of you have more experience working with the planning board, and you feel that they will read this as a two-prong thing, and they will stop first at extraordinary before they move on to the 50% or the loss of funding. And if that's the case, I have no problem adopting this language.
Thank you. Yeah, my reading of it, because the first sentence says costs to the city will be extraordinary, and then we move on to the second where those extraordinary costs must be supported. I feel comfortable with the language as written. Do other folks have input? Councilor Pastrich Clemmer.
Thank you. This is, and it goes to what Councilor Elkin just was talking about. You said the planning board, they get a budget for a project, and that's how they would see if this lighting pushes them way out of range of the budget, then they're going to have to look at it. So it seems to make sense, like that would, raise the extraordinary flag that they would need to look into it further. So I'm happy with the way it's written now, and I trust the planning board to look at it. If the project's way over budget, they can then look at the lighting and see if it is what's throwing them into the red zone. Mm-hmm. Am I understanding it right, Councilor? I know it's a simplistic way to put it, but.
Yep,
no, that's okay. I think it's more likely that if costs were going to overrun in such a way that it was going to put the project in jeopardy or make the city reconsider its design, then they would come back and ask for this waiver. I mean, Director Mish can speak to that. One thing to keep in mind is it's much more likely that the first inclination will always be I think they'll try to design by the by right standards first, and would only be coming to the planning board for this kind of waiver if what they're getting back is the price of, the cost to procure these things are much more than we anticipated, and so therefore we need to reconsider this design, or in the alternative, the state has said we would fund the lighting portion of this project, but we won't now because you're going to insist on this, these lighting standards and that kind of thing. So I think it's so it's not. It may be that it could be that the only reason the city might come for certain projects would be to seek a waiver like this, and it would be in a pretty extraordinary circumstance, I think, where there was a real, like, and that's what I was going for in writing this language, was trying to get at, like, the news is in, we know what the deal is, and it's definitely gonna cost us more, and that's the point at which I think there ought to be some review at some level of the civic process to weigh in on that before we grant a waiver. So that's what I was going for with this language. It's fascinating. You should tune into a planning board meeting sometime. It's,
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying, yeah.
Councilor Moulton.
Could we get that language on the screen one more time, please?
Laura? All right, thank you, Laura. Councilor Moulton.
Yes, I'm comfortable with this language. I think it is impossible to legislate an entirely objective definition of extraordinary, and I think that it has to be left to the discretion of competent planning board members, and then they to determine at a particular point in time in the future what is reasonably accepted as extraordinary, and then be guided by this additional, more specific language that would be supporting evidence. So I'm comfortable with this.
Further discussion on the amendment that we have on the floor. And Councilor Pastric-Clemmer, do you have your hand raised again, or? Okay. Councilor Mary.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's times like this where I'm like, I'm glad we can go back and amend it, when we get some experiential cases out there, because, right now what's happening with cost, I think this language will serve. But if we had some crazy economy, then we might be exempting, I can imagine, that we might have to think about that more. I think for now, I think this will work, but I just wanted to tell the new counselors, we go back and amend legislation, we amend amendments, and we, if there's a demonstrated issue that arises after some time. So that's what I'm going with.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this amendment? All right, then shall we move to a vote? Laura, would you call the roll on the amendment as written?
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Pastric-Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
Councilor Dobbs.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
yes.
And Councilor Jarrett.
Yes. So that amendment passes unanimously. So now we return to the entirety to discuss. And I think Councilor Maori, you had a question that from an email?
Right, which is actually a member who's here, so, but if James, we still see you, you're still recognized. If you want to adjust that, if you feel you can't, we can talk about recognizing Don, but.
Could you let us know
Oh,
where
I'm sorry.
it is
Yeah,
in,
section
that you're
6.
referring to?
Yes. Okay. Section 6, item 1, the suggestion was to replace no new bulbs may exceed lumen levels prescribed herein with no new bulbs may exceed lumen levels nor correlated color temperature limits 2700 K prescribed herein. So it's adding correlated color temperature limits. Yes.
And you're, yeah.
So I guess my question is, I guess I'm asking your thoughts on that.
Asking Dr. Lowenthal, yes.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Obviously, the intent of paragraph 2 in section 6, subsection 1, is to make sure that when a bulb is put into an existing fixture, that it not be much brighter than the previous bulb. But much bluer is also bad, for all the reasons we've all talked about. So this is a case where it's not a new fixture, so it doesn't fall under the rest of the restrictions of the bylaw. It's just for replacement bulbs. But I think it's an excellent idea to protect against much bluer bulbs than were in before, and to slowly take advantage of any opportunity to reduce egregious offenders, lights that are too bright, too blue, too glary, with lights that are compliant with the rest of the intent of the bylaw. This is, I think, a good idea.
Thank you.
Councilor Moulton.
So did you make that as a motion?
I did not make it as a motion yet. I was
Are you comfortable now making that as a motion?
Yes.
I will second that.
Okay. So, yeah, so I moved, right. So I'm moving to amend section 6 to say, no new bulbs may exceed lumen levels nor correlated color temperature limits 2700 K prescribed herein. So adding nor correlated color temperature limits 2700 K.
Okay.
And
I will second that and then ask for Director Mish's reaction to that.
So prescribed herein, 2700 K already means 2700 K. I'm not sure it's necessary to repeat the 2700 K and have that in two places. If that's a friendly amendment?
Sure.
Okay. And Councilor Moulton, are you?
I wanted to hear from Director Mish on that.
Okay. Director Mish?
Thanks. I think this may be an instance where it is really unenforceable. I think it would be, it sounds good, but if you think about all the bulbs that are out there in the world to purchase, Amazon, Walmart, Stop and Shop, you name it, you're going to grab a bulb off the shelf, the royal you, and you're not going to be looking at color temperature. You're going to pop it in your outside light. It might look just like the one that you had before that burned out. And then, your neighbor might call the building department for enforcement, and there's just no capacity to sort of go out and police every single bulb change that's made, and there's no tool to measure color temperature on that at that level, going around to individual fixtures on people's property to do that, I think will set people up for frustration, honestly, at this point. And I think the reason why that we wanted to allow some allowances for bulb changes, people aren't changing their fixtures, but once they change a fixture that maybe has an embedded LED, then they need to read and figure out which one meets the standard. But simply swapping out a bulb, I think, would be very difficult to enforce.
Councilor Moulton.
So how would the addition that has been suggested differ from exceeding lumen levels in terms of the enforceability of changing a bulb?
Well, because color temperature is much harder to measure, and when you have, it's still going to be hard. Don't get me wrong. I think it will be hard if someone calls to complain that their neighbor installed a light in that's way brighter than the bulb that was in there before. We have a light meter, can go measure and say, okay, this exceeds what the light levels are. Please put a baffle on, or please, swap the bulb out. That's going to be difficult as well. And it will be complaint driven, but it doesn't mean that the building department's going to have the capacity to go out and, respond to all of these complaints. But the only thing that makes it a little bit easier is the city does have a light meter that can measure, those levels.
Discussion on this proposed amendment. Councilor Maori.
So is it kind of a technology issue that we don't have a way to, kind of an on-the-ground way to measure correlated color temperature? Is that what you're saying, basically?
That's part of it, but the other part is, it's going down to the very, into the minutia of people's lives, essentially, and regulating what they're purchasing as just a simple replacement bulb for their lights. And the other piece is someone could easily, they could say, look, this is the same type of light that I had that burned out, and I'm just replacing the same one. So if it was a 5,000 K bulb and I'm getting another 5,000 K bulb, that's not a change. But someone might perceive it as new because the light was burned out for a day or 5 days or what have you. And then, so we also, because zoning can't force people to change out or make modifications of what's installed legally before an ordinance has been adopted, there is that sort of built-in allowance to continue using or maintaining whatever you had prior. And so there, this could just open the door for constant friction between neighbors, between the city and in terms of enforcement, and arguments about, well, I've had this for 5 years, no one said anything, now I just switched out a bulb and you're telling me I have to do something different. It's just, I think, overly burdensome.
Other comments on the motion is on the floor to amend. Councilor Maori.
Do we want to hear from our recognized guest? I didn't know if they wanted to.
If you'd like to.
Yes.
Thank you again. Director Mish is right that this is difficult to enforce, but she's also right that much of this ordinance, and probably many other ordinances in planning and zoning, are difficult to enforce, and that it would be complaint-driven. It isn't that hard to measure correlated color temperature. I'm doing it right now for these lights, and the answer is 3,700. This costs about $40. It's also written on every light bulb that you buy in the store what the color temperature is. But I understand that there are practical and political considerations that I think Director Mish is talking about. Nobody's expecting the building inspector to go to every individual residence and unscrew the light bulb and examine the color temperature. This is just to say it's not that hard to measure. The technology actually is not expensive. The city could easily invest in fancier equipment than this, that from a distance, without actually going onto residential properties, one could easily measure the color temperature of a light. But that does not address the enforceability issue. I do think it's, in general, a good proposal to consider from the perspective of educating the public, to have it on the books as a desired value, that we want to minimize the amount of harmful blue light in the nighttime environment, is a good thing. And insofar as this is a useful instrument to promote that education, I would support it.
Thank you. Councilor Rothenberg.
That resonates. This is probably as good a time as any to tell you all, if you haven't figured it out by now with all of my questions. And I'm autistic, and the lights, the blue lights, really, really hurt. I think it is a really nice gesture to set that tone. We do have tons of ordinances that we don't and can't enforce, and we have a lot of discretion as we go through it. I like this. I like that amendment still.
Thank you. Councilor Elkins.
I agree with Director Mish. I think we always need to be concerned about enforceability. If we wish to educate the community about this issue, then that's what we should do. Is we should educate. In fact, in putting it in is something. It's in effect a sanction. It is something. It encourages having people call the city to intervene when a neighborly discussion might go a lot further. And I think maybe our time and energy, I don't think we should write sanctioning type provisions when what we're hoping to do is to achieve aspirational goals and educate folks. I think we're a pretty good-hearted community that will be receptive to taking a moment in the hardware store to look at our bulbs and change our buying patterns if we're just asked to do it. I also think over time that what is available to buy will be increasingly more in line with what we're trying to achieve here, and that those options will be better marketed and better displayed at the hardware store. So I think at the end of the day, if we don't have somebody to respond to somebody's call about this, and either effectively in terms of technology or even just having the people power to do it, that's not a good use of our legislative power.
Thank you. Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I feel both. I feel this because I definitely don't want to set up our departments, our enforcing agents. That's always the rub with a lot of ordinances like this. I do feel like I'm not actually hearing. I feel like enforceability is going to be an issue without this. Like, I just think it's going to be a struggle, and it's one of those things. And I do feel like, so I kind of got that. It doesn't feel like a perfect situation to me, but I would lean towards including it. I think actually what you were saying, Councilor Elkins, is it will actually get easier to enforce this and avoid the situation in the future. So, and I do like the guidance it offers, recognizing that enforceability is going to be an issue. It sounds like whether that line is in it or not, and that's just something we always have to struggle with in the city. So I would just say that I'm leaning towards supporting this, but I hear what others are saying.
Councilor Moulton.
I've learned a lot about light in the last 4 months. This is not a topic about which I knew much before we started considering this ordinance, and I think that my concern is I agree that I don't think it's a technical problem of enforcing. I mean, Dr. Lowenthal just demonstrated that it's easy to measure the temperature of the light. It is a problem of staffing to enforce either the brightness of the light or the temperature, the amount of blue light. And I think that as guidance, as encouragement for the community, that if we're going to mention one, the brightness, I have learned that in addition to that, the blueness of the light is a real concern. So I would go for none or both. I think that is the best. Yes. I think that's we need. If we're going to mention one, I would mention the other.
Thank you, Councilor Labarge.
Yes. When we're talking about our building inspector's department coming out and going on private property to check to see if the correct bulb is in a lantern. I have a problem with that. I also have a problem by using our building inspector because of the staffing that they have. They are busy. If there's fires, if not tag sales. Tag sales are a big problem in the city. I know, I've called them many times because of complaints of that. They've been out in this ward, people parking, the way they're parking. I don't know where they would have time. If somebody complained, well, they do not have the right bulb on their property. They don't have time for that. But I understand, Councilor Muir, where you're coming at. But we can buy a piece of equipment, which the professor mentioned. It doesn't cost very much money, so people can use that and test it. So anyways, that's my feelings. I think that we're asking a little bit too much from a department that is extremely busy. Our building inspector also works with the Board of Health. Septic systems right down the line, all year round. I don't know. Very uncomfortable with that. That's my feelings.
Thank you. Other counselors, especially counselors who may not have spoken, who would like to weigh in? Yes, James Lowenthal, I'd like to be recognized. Go ahead.
Thank you. Another thought occurs to me about this. The intent here, evidently, I think it's an excellent one, is, again, slowly to bring lights into compliance. And there's another mechanism that some other cities and towns in Massachusetts and elsewhere use for that, which is to set a deadline. For example, I believe Newton or Wellesley, I can look it up if you want to know for sure, says all lights within 5 years of the passage of this ordinance must comply. That's not what's happening here. This seems like something of a compromise between it's grandfathered in, you don't have to worry about it, or you must comply within 5 years. This one says, well, when the bulb burns out, that's when you need to comply.
Councilor Pastor Clemmer? Your mic.
Like Stan, I've learned a lot about lights in my short time here. And I think that educating people about different lights and the harm that lights that are too bright or too blue cause, they'd make a more informed decision when they go to buy a bulb. Bulbs aren't cheap these days, and they last a really long time. So I think just education, people want to do the right thing. They want to protect wildlife, want to help their neighbors and their own health. So I think that might be a more effective way to get the word out, is by educating people and maybe having things in hardware stores like our local Arbor that when people are looking for a light, suggest this one.
Thank you. Well, I'll weigh in. So yeah, like Councilor Maori, I feel the conflict that we want, when someone replaces a bulb, we want them to pick a compliant color temperature. And then I also hear the concern around, how are you going to even know that someone replaced the bulb and that it now has the wrong color temperature? There's definitely, how will you prove that a bulb has been replaced, because that would be the requirement to trigger this. So I hear that conflict. I think, though, prescribing it in the code, along with the lumen levels, is a way to then write our educational materials to say the code says when you change a bulb, let's replace it with this. And I think that the building department is just going to say, we have no way to enforce that. We're not going to monitor someone who's changed a bulb. But the knowledge that that is the right thing to do, that is the code, and on a larger project, on a commercial project, that would be something where it might be easier to do that enforcement, or worth the time to do the enforcement. So on balance, I'll support this amendment. Councilor Elkins.
I'm sorry, just one more point. I'm also wondering whether this is appropriately within a zoning ordinance at all, as opposed to just a general ordinance. It's not, I just put that out there. It's not exactly clear to me how the changing of light bulbs fits in the zoning as a general matter, as opposed to a general ordinance that is enforced on its own merits. So.
It's a good question, and we know that changing a fixture is acceptable, but is changing a bulb. Director Mish, do you have any guidance for us? I now wish we had Attorney Seawald with us, but I believe he's still on vacation. So.
He's back, actually, but.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think I suppose you could, Newton's ordinances in zoning, and they have amortization for that. Great, that's still going to be a huge compliance nightmare. And I think lighting does belong in the zoning because it's associated with building and development and site building. But I think the piece about I think either way, enforcement would be an issue on an individual bulb by bulb basis. And I think I believe that, as time goes on, we'll have more options that are more prevalent for people to select, but there will still, I think, always be blue lights out there. And some people may favor those to the dismay of others, and may not even realize the difference, or may just feel like they like that type of light better. So it's going to be, I think, bottom line is, I think you guys have talked about this a lot. I think it's really up to you. If you're going to if you want to make this amendment, I think it's just, you should know that it'll be very difficult to enforce, and will not be sort of, my guess is, given all the other priorities that the building department has, that they will be addressing those first.
Thank you. So, shall we move toward voting on the amendment? It is still on the floor. Is there any other comment? Laura, would you read it back? Because I think there was some question. I suggested that it not have a color temperature because the color temperature is already prescribed, and I just wanted to make sure that you agreed, that Councilor Moulton, who seconded, also agreed with that. So would you read it back?
Sure. It's in section 6, and it's replacing the no new bulbs may exceed lumen levels prescribed herein with no new bulbs may exceed lumen levels nor correlated color temperature limits prescribed herein. Okay. No, not including the parenthetical 2700K.
Okay. And you agreed with that? Okay. Are we ready to vote on this amendment? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Pastrick-Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
Councilor Dobbs.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
No.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
And Councilor Labarge.
Yeah.
So that passes with Councilor Elkins opposed. I believe, Director Mish, there were some other cleanup measures, typos and such that were brought to our attention?
I saw the one online, and it seems like that was there. There's mounting height was on the latest agenda that I saw, so I don't see that that's.
Okay, so we'll go to, do you recall what section that is? Pole heights. So that's section.
F.
Section 4, part F, pole heights. So it says, site light poles must be a maximum of 25 feet in parking lots for commercial and industrial uses within commercial and industrial parking lots and along streets. Then it says, the maximum mounting height in all residential districts must be 16 feet. So it sounds like it's specifying the mounting height for residential districts, but not for commercial and industrial, right? So should it instead say, should the whole section be called mounting heights, and then site light mounting heights must be a maximum of 25 feet? But the poles are also a maximum of 25 feet, right? That's a little confusing to me.
Yeah.
Laura, are you able to bring up page 7? That's
Yes.
part F.
Can you see it well enough?
Could you zoom in just a little?
Something else is covering the Zoom.
And I'd like to ask James Lowenthal, because I believe he brought this to our attention, your thoughts on potential language change to clarify?
Thank you. Yes, the point here in section F on page 7 is that it doesn't really matter how high the pole is, it matters how high the light is mounted. You could have a pole that's 100 feet high with a light that's only 10 feet high. What matters is how high the light is mounted. So I would suggest just replacing pole heights with mounting heights, and site light poles must be a maximum of 25 with mounting heights must be no higher than 25. That's what I would suggest.
Okay, so then there are two changes. So I'll make a motion to replace the title of F to be mounting heights rather than pole heights, although it's really pole and mounting heights, right? Director Mish, because we don't want the poles to be higher than 25 feet either, even if you might put the light lower?
Correct.
Okay, so pole and mounting lights, does that sound?
Mounting height.
You think it should just be called mounting height?
No, it's just because you said
No,
lights.
pole and mounting height.
Pole and mounting heights. So the amendment is, it should read pole and mounting heights, and then site light poles must be a maximum of 25 feet with a mounting height, with a maximum mounting height of 25 feet in parking lots for commercial and industrial uses. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Jarrett, seconded by Councilor Rothenberg. Director Mish, does that sound clear?
Yep.
Okay. If you could stop screen sharing, discussion on that amendment. Councilor Maori.
Oh, I just had a clarification, but then 16 foot is the mounting and the pole height? Let me just see. Oh, it's gone. I gotta find it again.
Hey, right, I guess that's
Right, I just wanna-
that's also another question, because theoretically, with that language, you could have a pole that, in residential district, you could have a pole that's 25 feet tall, even though the mounting height could only be 16 feet. So it might make sense to say the maximum pole and mounting height in all residential districts must be 16 feet. So I'll remake that with that added, and will you second?
I will second that.
Okay. And just confirming, Director Mish, does that all sound good to you? All right, thank you. Discussion on this amendment. All right, roll call, please.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Councilor Pastich Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
Councilor Dubs.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
And Councilor Maori.
Yes.
That passes unanimously. Director, were there any other minor changes that we wanted to put in that you received? You're muted.
I think we drove her over the edge there. She's going. Oh, no, she's. Oh, yeah, there she is.
Director Mish? You're still muted.
There could be a cleanup in another section, must should be shall, in terms of in section 5, but I don't know if we cleaned that up. Regarding streetlight applications, shall not exceed 90 degrees and meet the following. And shall meet the following. I think there was just a missing directive there. So let me just find that.
Sure, bottom of page 8.
Oh, okay.
And just to minimize our number of roll call votes, are there any others that we could do as part of single amendment? So no others, Director Mish, that you know of?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking the rest of the council. I apologize. No.
Okay. So you think it should read, and shall meet the following? Yes, okay. So I'll make a motion that in section 5, the sentence that reads, streetlight applications may not exceed 90 degrees and meet the following, it will read, not exceed 90 degrees and shall meet the following. Just to clarify that the may not doesn't, like, a motion made by Councilor Jarrett, seconded by Councilor Elkins. Discussion on this amendment? Roll call, please.
Councilor Pastich Clemmer.
Yes.
Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
Councilor Dubs.
Yes.
Councilor Elkins.
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councilor Labarge.
Yes.
Councilor Maori.
Yes.
And Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thanks, everyone, for all your patience. We are at the finish line. Are there any other, is there any other discussion on this as a whole? All right, then we will move to, oh, sorry, Councilor Moulton.
Yes, I'll be brief, but I think this is momentous, and I think that we should recognize that. And I particularly want to offer major kudos to Director Mish for orchestrating what has been an extraordinarily technical, synthesis of hearing from advocates for cleaning up our light pollution, for looking at other communities for best practices, and for the for putting up with the meticulous review of this. We had a joint hearing with the planning board last year that ran over 2 sessions. We had another lengthy meeting Monday night. All of that clocked in at over 7.5 hours. So during all of this, Director Mish has worn the hats of planner, zoning administrator, scientist, and editor, because she had to make sure that the language actually matched the intention of all of this. I also want to recognize James Lowenthal for your diligence, your tenaciousness. Obviously, as an advocate, you wish that government moved faster, but but at least we're at the finish line. And I really do think this is huge. You know, we as a society over the last half century have paid a lot of attention to air pollution, water pollution, and now as a community we're recognizing light pollution. We're joining with, I think you said 55 other communities in Massachusetts. I just think that there's an opportunity, as Councilor Maori has said, both Monday night and tonight, for education, for guiding people to do the right thing. I don't think we're going to, it's not going to be the building commissioner who's going to be out there monitoring this, but I think there can be a lot of community discussion about this, and I hope that Northampton City Lights joins us in continuing that conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Moulton. I'll second all of that. Councilor Maori.
Just echo that, and just also thank all of our residents who've been showing up, emailing. Don Darnell, thank you for your suggestion, and yeah, this is what makes Northampton special and great. It's residents. Me. No, okay. Residents.
Councilor Elkins.
Yeah, I just want to briefly give a big shout out to the planning board, who put in such great work on this. Their work and their contribution in the joint legislative matters planning board meetings was invaluable and added a lot of clarity and really enriched our discussion of this. And it's also worth noting that they raised questions, and we did all of this in December. So they came back for a second meeting when there was still more work to be done. So I just, and unlike those of us here who get a little bit of compensation for our time, they are purely volunteer. So it's certainly worth noting that their part in this civic process has been extraordinary and very valuable.
Thank you. Councilor Labarge.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to read off things that I thought about today. I have to say that not just what's happened now and the time involved. There has been great concerns, I mean the lighting concerns, which was brought forth to our mayors and city councilors and many people in the city. As for our redistricting, I have gained over many homes on the right side of Ryan Road and all side streets that used to be Ward 7 for many years. I finally got them back after 10 years. I met a husband and wife, new residents of mine, who could not sleep in their bedroom at night due to the street light affecting them to sleep. And that sounds like the professor coming forth, constantly telling us of what it was doing on his street and affecting people to sleep. They had to change their bedroom. Chris Mason helped them to the best he could and placed a shield on the street light on the pole, and it was not large enough to block that glare. That was happening at their window. Then Chris had suggested to buy these special shades, and they did do that, and that was not effective. These changes are overdue. Glazes hazard, serious hazard on roadways. Light pollution is harmful to both people and wildlife. There's no question about that. It has been shown to reduce sleep and stress and the immune system in people. These effects have been demonstrated in many studies, many studies. I commend our planning board and Director Carolyn Mish for prioritizing them. I support the city's effort to bring the latest science to bear in updating its lighting ordinance. I also want to thank Professor James Lowenthal in helping with the language of this ordinance and the many residents who have joined in with their voices. Your voices meant so much to help what needed to make our city and its environment for our health and safety and for our wildlife. Their concerns that they brought forth dealing with bright lights. I want to thank all the city councilors who worked tirelessly in their committee with many, many hearings that have been scheduled. Lighting is very important for protecting human health and our wildlife, and good lighting improves the quality of life and saves us money. This is definitely a win-win, especially some of you councilors weren't involved when the professor would come in with people and talk about the problems going on with different neighborhoods. So I am so happy and thrilled that we all work together to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, roll call on this to approve this zoning ordinance.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. Did you ask for a roll call?
Oops, I forgot to turn on my mic. Are there any other comments on this zoning ordinance? Okay, a roll call, please.
Councilor Perry,
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg,
Yes.
Councilor Dubs,
Yes.
Councilor Elkins,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
and Councilor Pastridge Clemmer.
Yes.
All right, that passes unanimously. Great job, everyone. Let's take a, say, 6-minute recess, and then we'll come back for our 2 orders and 3 ordinances.
Councilor Jarrett?
Yeah.
I'm going to
Should've got water. I know.
Welcome back. Counselor Elkins has signed off for the night, but the 8 of us are still here, and we are going to move on to an order. This is 24.005, an order authorizing temporary construction easements for Rocky Hill Greenway. This is in second reading. We introduced and discussed this 2 weeks ago. And I think there were some questions about the communications with some of the abutters, which I believe were answered. That information was sent out. Is there further discussion on this order? Would someone like to make a motion to approve it?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Labarge and seconded by Councilor Perry. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilor Perry,
Yes.
Councilor Rothenberg,
Abstain.
Councilor Dubs,
Yes.
Councilor Elkins. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton.
Yes.
And Councilor Pastridge Clever.
Yes.
Okay, that passes with 1 abstention and 1 absent. So the next order is 24.010, an order to grant utility easement to National Grid for 196 Cook Avenue Affordable Housing Project. And I believe we have Keith Benoit with us. Thank you for hanging out for so long. Sorry to make you wait. And would you like to speak to this?
Sure, yeah. So the immediate reason I'm asking for this order is so that we can take the grant of the easement, which the mayor has already signed, and then bring that to the registry, and then we record it. That's the only reason that we need it. But the end goal is so that National Grid, once we record that, National Grid has everything they need to move a utility pole at 10 feet at the Rodbrook Greenway, so that's the 196 Cook property. And once National Grid moves that utility pole, then we can start to do construction on the parking lot, things like that. But this is, it was unseen just because we normally don't do, haven't done the land court before, so this is just a requirement for the guidelines of land court at the registry.
Great, thank you. Are there questions for Keith? Councilor Molt?
Not a question, just a comment. This is Ward 1, and this is this is administrative, as Keith described, but I just want to point out that I'm very happy that National Grid will be, the city has asked, and that National Grid will be providing the power for an electric vehicle charger on site in that parking lot.
Yes, that is correct. So the city council, the previous order, 22.108, you all authorized the land to be surplus for affordable housing, conservation and parking, and I think part of that conversation was providing an electrical vehicle charging station. So that will be made available.
Great, thank you. So we don't have to take any action tonight. This will appear in 2 weeks on our agenda for approval. There are no more questions or comments. We will move on to...
Oh, no, I was waiting. I was saying good night to Keith.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. Good night.
Oh, and
Oh, and good night, Mayor Shara. So we can move on to ordinances not yet referred. So no ordinance shall be voted on by the city council until it has been considered by the Committee on Legislative Matters. These three ordinances, one is a stop sign on Redford Drive, 24.007. One is 24.008, an ordinance relative to multi-way stop signs in various locations. And those locations, I'll just mention the three locations. One is the intersection of Riverside and Federal Street. The other is Warner Street and Hinckley Street. And the last is Prospect Street and Crescent Street and Summer Street. And then 24.009, an ordinance relative to parking on West Street. This one is related to safety improvements, to improve sight lines on West Street near the Smith College parking garage. So those are the three, and I would suggest that, so the process will be, we refer them to legislative matters, and we can refer them to other committees as well. And then they'll be considered, there'll be a recommendation, and then they'll come back to us. If it's just legislative matters, they would come back in 2 weeks, most likely. So I would suggest that we move all three of these, refer all three of these to legislative matters, if someone would like to make such a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay?
I'll second
I'll
that.
second that. Oh, sorry.
So motion made by Councilor Labarge, and I'll give that to Councilor Dubs as the second. Any discussion on this referral to legislative matters? Okay, roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Rothenberg,
Yes.
Councilor Dobbs,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
Councilor Passage Clemmer,
Yes.
and Councilor Perry.
Yes.
Okay, those three ordinances have been referred to legislative matters. They'll be on the February 12th agenda, and then they should come back here for our February 15th meeting. That is it for the agenda. Good job,
Move
everyone.
to adjourn? Oh, sorry.
Motion.
Sorry.
Yeah. Was there a second on that motion
Second.
to adjourn? Okay, motion made by Councilor Maori, seconded by Councilor Perry. No discussion on adjourning, so roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Dobbs,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Moulton,
Yes.
Councilor Passage Clemmer,
Yes.
Councilor Perry,
Yes.
and Councilor Rothenberg.
Yes.
All right, we are adjourned.
I'm sorry.